Edward Scissorhands is a 1990 film directed by Tim Burton. Screenplay is by Caroline Thompson, based on an idea by Burton. And it stars Johnny Depp as the title role, Edward Scissorhands. It also stars Diane Weist, Winona Ryder and Anthony Michael Hall from The Breakfast Club fame. I recently got Cody Leach to review Batman Returns over on his channel. He wasn't a fan, must be said. I am a big fan. And actually I'm a big Tim Burton fan, particularly his earlier work. I don't think his output in later years has been quite as consistent, although I do think there's still quite a few films in his catalogue recently that have impressed me. But a lot of his early work, yeah, really impressed me. Kind of started my love for film, really. Made me want to become a director. It was through Tim Burton's early movies that I got that passion. This being, yeah, one of them. In fact, if there is one film from Burton's filmography that I would say is his masterpiece, that was the one that he would be known for, you know, when he goes to his grave and you have one film that kind of people talk about, I would say it would be this one, or should be this one. So for those who don't know, it is obviously about this title character, Edward Scissorhands, who is a creation. He's basically Frankenstein's monster, except Frankenstein in this case was a loving creator. He just happened to die before he could finish Edward off, so he's stuck with these scissor hands. And instead of Frankenstein's monster who goes on the rampage out of, I don't know, misplaced anger, out of not having that father figure to direct him, here he's actually a very lovable character. He's very naive, he's almost childlike in his thinking. Now, when an Avon lady, played by Diane Weist, comes calling to check who lives in this big house on top of this hill, it kind of looks all dilapidated, doesn't really look like anyone lives there, she finds him and she takes him home, kind of adopts him. And brings him into the family, much to her daughter's annoyance, I think, at first. Her daughter being played by Winona Ryder. And yeah, it's really all about what happens when this outsider is brought into this community. It's very much a look at suburban life, almost in the way that American Beauty also looked at suburban life, kind of how everything on top looks rosy, looks colourful, looks bright, but underneath there is something quite dark, quite malicious at times, and quite broken. The way they receive Edward into the community, it's almost like a pop star. It's fame. He gets famous very quickly. People want a piece of that new thing, and then the moment they're done with him, they essentially turn on him and treat him like absolute garbage and run him out of town. Again, very similar to the old Frankenstein story in which they chase Frankenstein's monster down with pitchforks. You know, no pitchforks here, but there might as well be by the time we get to the end. You can tell how much of a personal project this is for Burton. Obviously, this character came out of his mind. And he always felt like an outsider when he was at school. He's still very much an outsider today. When you look at his films, they're not the most conventional of movies with regards to how they look and with regards to the characters that take centre stage. They're often dark outsiders. Yeah, this obviously being no different. This is the archetypal Burton character, I think, but the one I think that feels most personal. It's the one that I have the most personal connection to as well when I watch. I find it to be quite an emotional film at times because, like I say, we're dealing with essentially this childlike mind, and we see moments of anger from Edward. You know, these moments where he doesn't know what to do with his emotions because he's never been taught. He's been locked away in this house for so long, he's never really had a parent. Like, he had the father figure of this creator who taught him so much but then died before he could really teach him the rest. So he's stuck in this like childlike state, but he has, yeah, all these different emotions and feelings that he doesn't quite know how to express himself with. but he is still mature. Like, there are times in the film, for example, Winona Ryder's character, her boyfriend, tricks Edward, or he thinks he's tricking Edward, into breaking into his house to steal some of his father's money. But Edward knows exactly what's going on. So although he does look like this naive child, there are times when he knows exactly what's going on, but he does it for love. He does it because he loves this character played by Winona Ryder. He does it because she asked him to. He knew what was going on, but she asked him to do it, so he did it. And it's a really tender moment, actually, when he reveals that, and you realise there's actually a lot more to this guy underneath, a lot going on. He's able to process things, again, like a child. You know, for any parent, I'm a parent myself, this happens all the time. I don't think we give children the credit they deserve at times. You know, my little girl, she'll come out with things sometimes where it feels like she won't be taking it in. You can have a private conversation, what you think is a private conversation with the other half. Child won't, you know, she won't take it in, and then she'll call you out on it. You know, 5-10 minutes later, she'll say something that's like, oh, she was paying attention big time. She knew exactly what was going on. And that's the way Edward feels as a character. You can underestimate him because of his childlike state, but you shouldn't, because actually there's a lot going on underneath. Like most films by Burton, I think this one is served a lot better when you come to it as a fairy tale. That's what it's meant as. It's a fairy tale. It's not meant as a slice of real life drama. It's a fairy tale. It's a fable, and that's where Burton does his best work. You know, I think if you come to this as a reality, it's a piece of reality, it's obviously going to trip over itself. It's obviously going to have flaws, and things aren't going to quite mesh up. How does Edward go to the toilet? You know, how's he ever prepared food for himself before? Does he even need it? This, that, and all these questions, they're unimportant, because at the end of the day, what is important is the truth that comes out of the story. You know, that's what fables are. They're stories that are unbelievable, but they reveal truth about life. And I think what this film does is reveal many different truths about the way we live, and about, again, that suburban society, which is pretty clean cut on the top, but under the surface there's a lot going wrong with it. So you have all these different collection of characters that reveal that broken suburban life. So you get this character played by Kathy Baker, who is basically the village tramp. She latches on to Edward. She's a very sexual kind of being. She's a bit of a force of nature in that regard. But you see the way in which she preys on Edward's naivety, or perceived naivety, and when he doesn't kind of return that, when he doesn't give her what she wants and she feels embarrassed, she turns on him. How many vulnerable people in society are unfortunately led astray by people like this. You have this character of Esmeralda, who represents the more fanatical side of religion that is, you know, within all societies. You know, as much as religion can be a positive force, I genuinely believe that, there's no doubt it can also be a negative force. In this case, we can see how religious behaviour, religious fanaticism can give way to fear, which leads to intolerance and judgment and recrimination and just negative feelings towards things or people that just simply lack understanding. While those two particular characters kind of portray the way that there are negative forces, active negative forces, and by that I mean forces that are actively working towards kind of destroying society from within, even though they may not know it. You get this character of Bill, who is Kim's dad, Winona Ryder's character, it's her dad, played by Alan Arkin, and he's just so passive in everything that it's destructive. It's a destructive way of being. Like, he doesn't ever seem to take charge in any real sense. He's got a lot of thoughts about, you know, what might be right and wrong, but he never really puts his foot down about anything. He's so passive. Couple that with Peg, the Diane Weist character. She is a woman who, I think she starts out wanting to do right by Edward, but she's made a mistake, really. She's out of her depth. She's taken on something that she should have never really taken on. And that in itself becomes quite a destructive decision. You know, if she'd have left him up where he was, then none of the bad stuff that happens would have happened. That isn't to say that she was wrong to try and do the right thing. You just, yeah, you get to see this, the way that society, I guess, judges things from the outside as being, you know, like she takes a look at where Edward is and she doesn't like it. And I don't think we do as audiences. You know, the thought of this guy living on his own in this dark, abandoned, broken down old house, it would seem very wrong. You would want to bring him into normal society, which is what she does. But actually, in Edward's case, that is the most destructive thing. It wasn't the best thing for him. So it is a film that challenges these ideas of perception, the way we look at outsiders, outcasts, and you know, people who maybe don't seem normal, don't seem quite right, and actually just come to them where they're at, rather than trying to bring them into where we're at and force them to be a cookie cutter version of, you know, of society in which everything has to look the same, everything has to feed into this generic way of being. So yeah, it's a really good social commentary in that regard. Johnny Depp is fantastic, I must say, as Edward Scissorhands. He's someone who over recent years I've not really appreciated as much as maybe I once would have done. I think he did too many of these kinds of roles where it was all about the makeup, or it felt like it was all about the makeup and this, that and the other. Maybe too many roles with Tim Burton, that it started to become a bit of a shtick that wore thin. But here, watching this film, again, after quite a few years, it must be said, his physical performance here is absolutely brilliant. Just some of the subtle things that he does, whether it's with the hands or just the facial expressions, the body language, yeah, he really embodies this character, this naive man-child. If there's a character in this film who does get a little shortchanged, I would say it is Kim. Winona Ryder's character. She doesn't get as much screen time as you might expect, given that she's probably the second lead. Yeah, because much of the first kind of act of the film is devoted more to her mother, really, you know, before she's introduced. So yeah, that is a shame, but I do like her here. I like her as a presence. I've always liked Winona Ryder. I do love as well, there's a particular moment between the two when a lot of stuff has started to kind of become a bit of a mess, and she asks him to hold her and he can't. He's scared of hurting her because of his hands, and he kind of turns and walks to the other side of the room, and that moment this time round really affected me. Just yeah, being in Edward's position and, you know, not wanting to hurt this woman that he loves, and she makes her way across the room and kind of buries herself under his arms, kind of wraps them around her, so she guides him in that. And it was a really tender moment that, I don't know, I don't know if it ever affected me that way before, but this time around it did. I really liked it. The whole film really does feel like a mashup between Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Beauty and the Beast. It's got the romanticism of Beauty and the Beast and the gothic horror of Frankenstein, and all the thematic elements that both of those stories are filled with. The production design is absolutely incredible. The visuals are stunning. There's, you know, something, I think even Burton's biggest detractors would say that is a strength of his. You know, when Cody reviewed Batman Returns, he said that he couldn't fault the visuals, and I think that's the same here. There's a particular style with Burton. You either like it or you don't. I do. I much preferred his style when it was rooted in more practical effects, things that he physically put on screen. And I think one of the things that's let his later career down is an overuse of CGI. That kind of style that he has doesn't translate as well with when it's done with CGI, whereas when it's done with physical, practical stuff, it does. Like, there's some very quaint stuff in here, it must be said. Like when we see the inventor, played by Vincent Price, when we see some of his inventions, like there's one where he's got this massive piece of machinery and it's doing all kinds of things, essentially to make these cookies at the end, this heart-shaped cookie. And when you look at it, you know, as a practical piece of machinery that has actually been built in a Michel Gondry kind of way, it doesn't work. You're looking at it and you're like, those cookie cutters wouldn't even cut the damn things, never mind bring them out in a nice perfect shape. But you're looking at it through Edward's memories. You know, it's like we see this whole thing when Edward goes back into his memories, and to him this is how it could have looked. I mean, that might not have been how it actually looked, this is just how he remembers it. But as I say, you've got to come at it from a fairy tale perspective. When you can do that, I think you're going to appreciate what this film has to offer, and for me it has a lot to offer. Yeah, I love it, love Edward Scissorhands. It's one of my favourite films of the 90s. As I said, I do think it is Burton's finest work, and I will give it a 5 out of 5. But what about you? Are you a Tim Burton fan? Do you like Edward Scissorhands? If so, where do you think it sits amongst the rest of his work? Yeah, please do comment below, let me know your thoughts on this film, and until next time, cracking.